G'day, welcome to New Game Plus TV live on Twitch. You might be hanging out with us on Twitch live on C31, C44, or listening to us as a podcast. My name's Cringe, and I'm joined this week by Jason and Kart with audio because the joys of Twitch live streaming mean that sometimes stuff just doesn't work. And I'm hoping that chat lets us know if it doesn't work. But by all accounts, at this point, it's likely to be working. Jason and Kart, how you going?
Oh, Jason muted himself for the record there, so that wasn't your fault.
That wasn't my fault. He was
I'll sneeze into the mic next time if you want. Coronavirus messaging broken.
It's straight up T's on day. You had to move away from the mic.
Kart, you've been playing a game called Moon, and you're going to talk a little bit about cult followings in games.
Yeah, so Moon was and is, I guess, an old PlayStation 1 game that finally found some love on the Nintendo Switch because that's just how the Switch does. It'll just... a bunch of games will just drop on it whenever they want. And we're going to be talking about cult classics as well, about how people are visiting some of these games that definitely deserved a lot more attention back in the day, but more on that later.
And Jason, you've been playing Not Tonight, which I would not recommend anyone Google at home, but it's sort of Papers, Please, but Brexit is the way that you spoke about it.
Yeah, that's basically what it is on the lid kind of thing. Like it's got tongue-in-cheek moments. There's a bit of humor in there, but it's showing. It's a good example of the stifling bureaucracy of I guess prejudice, and it does a really good job of that. In the same way that Papers, Please did a real concise job of what it wanted to do.
Cool. So that's what's coming up on the show this week. First, we'll get into the gaming news headlines of the week. SMS messages sent by JB Hi-Fi Wednesday said that customers who pre-ordered a PS5 or Xbox Series X would have until midnight Sunday to pay for the full amount of the pre-order or lose their spot in the queue. Those that would be unable to do so would go back to the back of the queue and would not have a pre-order come launch day. Payment methods did not allow for the use of gift cards, interestingly. According to a report from Byteside, consumer advocacy organization Choice confirmed that gift cards are meant to operate like cash. Any onerous restrictions on gift card use have to be clearly explained at the time of the gift card purchase. JB Hi-Fi has clear terms and conditions for gift cards with no information about restrictions. They went on to say that JB Hi-Fi is at real risk of breaching the consumer law here by misleading customers about gift card terms and conditions. Following the article being published, the retailer provided a workaround where gift cards can be used. This really comes after a long sort of stretch of time where we've seen just a mess around pre-orders, around, I think it was PS5 first, saying, oh, no, you'll have plenty of time to pre-order. We won't throw it at your last second. And then they did. And then Xbox was like, I think Xbox at least committed to, we are going to open it up for you on a date. And then they did that.
Yeah.
But it was still a mess. Like the supply does not seem to match the demand, which is true for most launches. But do you think that, where do you think, I guess, most of the blame in these situations would be coming from? Is it on more of the retailer or the manufacturer side? Or
I think JB Hi-Fi, for example, I was trolling through a lot of threads on certain video gaming websites, and there's been a few people that are potential employees of JB Hi-Fi or people working the front line saying that they're basically their website backend wasn't able to support gift cards. Now, we're not too particularly sure if that's bullcrap or not, but they've managed a workaround, which is very haphazard.
Super dodgy. Yeah,
it's very dodgy.
You've got to give them the gift card details, but you have to have paid with it for it with your credit card.
You have to pay it in full with your debit, credit card, or even PayPal. But what they'll do is you'll put in the gift card information by filling out a separate form. It's probably some Google form nonsense or something. And then they'll refund it back to you on your respective method of payment. On top of that, they have there's been other vendors as well that, a bit more like independent vendors. There's Gamesmen in Sydney, for example. As soon as they opened up PlayStation 5 pre-orders, this was after EB Games and JB
they were instant out.
Their servers just crap themselves.
Yeah.
So they managed to, compared to going to a brick and mortar store, if they just say you got to come in, you got to pre-order, which EB Games would have done day one had it not been for COVID. That would have been a different story. People would have come in, they would have done their allocations. You get in at 9 a.m. and you're guaranteed a spot. But people online and hawkers and stuff like that, obviously that kind of makes it far more messy than it should be.
EA has revealed Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered. The game is releasing on PS4 and Xbox One on November 6th and Nintendo Switch on November 13th. The remastered version of the game will have enhanced visuals, cross-platform multiplayer, and includes all of the main DLC that released for the game at its original release. I honestly am not that kind of crappy about this because I really loved Hot Pursuit.
Need for Speed is an interesting beast. No, like yes and no. Like I mean, Underground, you had good times with it, but the main reason you played Underground was because it was at every LAN cafe ever. So if people didn't want to play Dota or CS, that was what you had to play. But like I don't know. Criterion died for this. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of where my mind sits with it. And if I could have a good Burnout game or another Need for Speed game, I mean, it's not even a question. Yeah. So for me, like Burnout Paradise being on every platform now, that's great. But like, yeah, so I don't have the nostalgia attached to Most Wanted in the modern set. I remember in the old days when it was SS's run away from coppers and stuff like that.
The original Most Wanted.
In the old days. So I never really had the attachment to that per se. So to me, it's kind of like, it's nice, but where's my Burnout game?
Well, I mean, Burnout Paradise Remastered came out last year, I think.
Yeah.
What other Burnout games have there been since then? Like new games since Burnout Paradise?
None.
That was it.
None. No, that's it. They killed it there.
I do agree in the sense that this is a bit of a sore spot for me as well, because not only was this a game that Criterion essentially died for, but this is the game that they knocked back Nintendo on because Nintendo approached them to do a new F-Zero game, which if it wasn't Sega, Criterion would have been a perfect fit. So that's my sore spot because Nintendo don't care about that series anymore, and I really want them to care.
Ubisoft is overhauling Hyperscape just 3 months after the game's launch. After launching on PC in July, I think technically in early access, the game eventually made its way to console in August, but the console launch did not achieve the high expectations Ubisoft set for the game. The studio said it is aware that it also didn't meet player expectations either, and as a result, the studio is working on a large overhaul to the game's combat, game modes, player modes, and more. They broke down the overhaul into 5 different sections: combat, comfort, sure, onboarding, game modes, player goals, and crossplay. Ubisoft says it always intended for Hyperscape's ceiling to be high, but admits that the skill floor is too high, which results in a difficult experience for new players. You're hanging out with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. We'll be back in a sec talking more video games. You're back with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. You might be hanging out with us on C31, C44, or listening as a podcast. My name's Cringe. I'm here with Jason and Kart. Look, we're no strangers to sort of niche, smaller games, sort of loosely falls into the same ballpark as games with cult followings. I'm not sure if, I'm trying to think of some games that might do that, but we'll get into that a little bit later on because, Kart, you've been playing a game called Moon. This is not a new release, but it is a new Switch re-release. What is it?
So Moon is a recently released game that dropped on the Nintendo eShop. We're probably talking about maybe a month or two ago, which is a localization of Moon Remix RPG Adventure that came out way back on the PlayStation 1 in Japan around about 1997 by developer Love Delic. I know. More on that later. That's fine. It depicts the adventures of a young boy who was thrust into his television set and teleported into the world of his favorite JRPG game that he was playing before. Now, compared to a lot of games at the time and even now, the general gist here is that you take up the role of the main hero and bring balance to a ravaged land, but instead it tasks you as an invisible boy who is urged by a being named Queen Aphrodite to save her and the world by undoing the damage caused by the main armored protagonist of the game that you're playing as a child, which thematically is your antagonist.
You mentioned that it sort of plays like a JRPG, or the game that you're playing plays like a JRPG.
Yes.
That sort of like meta vibe about it. Is it pretty early on that you are, I guess, transported into the game?
Yeah. So as you saw there on the footage just then, the game starts off like the first 10 minutes is basically like it's kind of making a mockery of, you know, those kind of Dragon Quest style RPGs with like really just like 16-bit style flavoring, and you're going around and, you know, you're fighting monsters, and it's kind of a scripted sequence. But if there was like one way I would describe the game, I think the term anti-RPG would do it. And I think the developers have said the exact same thing. So the player kind of progresses through the game by procuring love. And this can be achieved in a variety of ways, like finding corpses of monsters defeated by the main protagonist of the game, and then basically catching their spirit, catching their ghost, and then reviving them. Or even just by helping people around the town, completing fetch quests, or, you know, spending time with the inhabitants of the town the world that you're sucked into, basically. So I think like anti-RPG is a pretty fitting term because it really kind of serves as like a tongue-in-cheek satire of RPG games. Like it really is just kind of just making fun of everything. And on the surface level, the game isn't really afraid to kind of poke fun at the main antagonist of the game, which is like the guy in the armored suit that goes around killing and collecting experience. Is basically like framed as just really sociopathic, but like incredibly inefficient. And he basically fumbles at anything that's not like killing like low level enemies so you can grind for XP, or how the civilians are completely fine with like the antagonist of the game just rummaging through their belongings for money and potions and stuff. But when you go and do it, they have an issue with it. You know, they don't extend that same courtesy to you. So they sit there and they just like, they drag you at the back and they start going, "You're a naughty boy for doing this." But the other guy's like, "Yeah, cool, just grab our shit, whatever." So there's other layers to it as well, like how a small, tiny island that you're sucked into manages to house so many different climates and people from all walks of life. Like it's basically like the desert area and like the grassy area, like the grassy field is basically like a stone's throw away, and the game kind of makes fun of itself for that a little bit. And like it keeps its lighthearted demeanor to be kind of harmless observational comedy rather than like being really quickly degenerating to like smug cynicism. Like, this is a video game, guys.
I was going to say, does that subversion get kind of tired by not towards the end, but like
I'm going to say, just from watching this Kart and knowing you would be the Earthbound stan that you are, I am. This screams Itoi to me. Like it just
does, right?
screams, yeah. Like I can see why straight away you did it, and I think Armed and Dangerous is a similar title where it's kind of an era, kind of taking the mickey out of those particular style of games, and it seems like this kind of falls into that same thing where, you know, like it does have that. It's taking the piss out of something very obviously, but it's not kind of leaning so hard into it that it becomes like the singular form of its identity.
Yeah, and it's like it's just and this is a testament really. This came 2 years after Earthbound, and it's really incredible knowing like how ahead of its time it was. And like I guess coming around about the same time, this came out the same year as Final Fantasy VII did in Japan. That was a game that was without a doubt in everyone's PlayStation 1 disc tray. And it's very easy to understand how this game managed to kind of inspire its contemporaries, such as like Undertale, Off, Contact, and even Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. And I'm fairly certain a lot of these...
I remember.
Yeah, and a lot of these former employees of this company actually went on to make those games, like the Tingle game. So I can't really understate the significance of the localization at all, but it really just goes to show how important and how integral it is. But yeah, it's an interesting game where like the game runs on kind of like a day-night cycle, which wasn't eventually getting to the point where a lot of games during the PS1 era and N64 era were starting to do that and kind of play around with it. I mean, Majora's Mask, for example, is a really good example. Dead Rising, for example, a couple of years later, like using time mechanics, lightning returns, all that sort of stuff.
I mean, Animal Crossing.
And Animal Crossing as well. Yeah, exactly. But like there's in order to kind of further progress through the game, you need to kind of complete all these quests, save all these monsters. And what happens is you go to sleep, and then you level up. And basically, the more you level up, the further distance you can go to kind of unlock these other areas. So it all happens very organically. The game kind of slowly opens up to you. You'll notice on the top left-hand corner of the screen as well, you've got that weird kind of, that's the day-night cycle. And it basically shows you how much time you have left until you run out of time and you basically kind of stop dead in your tracks and you die. The game autosaves a lot, so it's not really kind of too hard or too gamey. Yeah. Like it actually kind of respects your time enough. And if there's like if there's an area that you do or like a certain segment that you do miss throughout the day, you can always kind of like skip a couple of days later on. Like if there's a person or a monster that only shows up at night or shows up on a particular day, the game doesn't give you any penalties or like there's no deadlines. You can just basically sleep 6 days and then return and then go capture that monster or complete that quest or whatever. So again, it's really kind of lighthearted. There's a lot of really charming characters in it. And, you know, I think it's really worth, like, a lot of the stuff that happens in the game, it's really worth kind of like just guide bashing it if the game starts to annoy you. But I still feel that the game kind of feels a bit organic enough that you can, if you spend enough time in its world, you kind of get a good understanding of how everything works.
So Moon, it's just called Moon in the English release, right? It's called something else in...
Yeah, it's called like Remix RPG Adventure, but they just decided to call it Moon here.
Cool. If you are not in the Japanese market, it is only on Switch. It was originally on PlayStation in 97, but it's now on Switch worldwide. You're hanging out with us here on New Game Plus TV. Stick around. We've got more video game goodness coming up in just a sec. You're back with us here on New Game Plus TV, live on Twitch. You might be watching us on C31, C44, or listening as a podcast. I'm Cringe, here with Jason and Kart. Jason, you've been playing a lot of games. You were listing off a long list of games before we went live.
Yeah, I have to publish reviews for them
afterwards.
Yeah,
we'll edit together YouTube reviews. And
you have to.
I do. Well, yeah. Well, no. Look, okay. So we don't take payment for reviews, and I don't think anyone should, and I don't think anyone straight up does. But like, if they give me a code, I feel obligated to do it. But I mean, I'm talking like, so the games that I've played external to ones that I've so I got what? About six off the top of my head that I'm playing at the moment that I'm going to have to make some content for. So it's been interesting.
But you've been playing one that, again, I was like trying to very quickly string together everything on the show, and it didn't work, and we were late, but it's fine because here we are. One that caught my eye was Papers, Please, but Brexit, not tonight. And you were like, I better not Google that. The first question was, can it nail the I have a family to feed level of dread? I guess answer that question afterwards. But first, what is Not Tonight?
So Not Tonight is basically a post-Brexit bureaucracy simulator. So you get to choose a backstory, and all the backstories are basically like it's a moral play at its core. So all the backstories are, turns out your gran was half Spanish, so therefore your citizenship doesn't confer to your parents, and therefore it doesn't confer to you. Congratulations, you're a foreigner. Get out. If you want to stay in the country, you got to follow these rules. There are all these ways that your citizenship has been invalidated because of Brexit. Therefore, too bad, so sad. Like, suck it up. And so basically, they put you in the assigned slum. You download their app. You get jobs off the app. You do those jobs. Well, it's like Centrelink, and then they force you to do it, and then the more you break the law, so it is basically, it's a lot of bouncing jobs and a lot of like security jobs and stuff like that. So you start at the local pub, you're checking for name for age on the ID. Cool. Second day, you're checking for age, and you're checking for whether the ID is expired. Third day, you're checking for age, whether it's expired and whether it's the right photo. And you're allowed a certain amount of fails in that time. And then some people go, oh, that's too bad. I didn't realize my thing was wrong. Here's $50 or 50 quid. What do you reckon? And so if you're at that point where you're like, well, I can get three fails before I even get a warning, I'll take the 50 quid. And so it really does start to ask those questions of, you start to understand why, people break the laws in these situations, because it's like, well, it's the best option. Like if I can make my quota the normal way and then still take this extra $50 and that'll help me survive and pay my rent for the next month, I'm going to take the $50. And so it does a good job of kind of juxtaposing what this sterile concept of like otherhood is, and alongside the realities of trying to survive in a world where you don't have enough money, or you don't have enough resources, or you've just been outed as a foreigner when you've lived there all your life, how you deal with that situation. So it does it in that Papers, Please kind of way. So it's a progressing scale of difficulty. The more time things goes on, the more difficult the game becomes. And it just really does get to that point where you do level 10 of each job, if you will, and it becomes hectic and it becomes too much to handle. And then suddenly, another thing will come on board, and then suddenly one of your neighbors has come to you asking for help, and so do you help the neighbor? But that's a night that you're meant to be working. If you miss too many nights of work, the coppers come around and hassle you. So it really becomes that thing, similar to Papers, Please. It juxtaposes what the realities of what it says it is. Glory to our Tosca. Brexit will save us from these things, with the realities of what that actually looks like as far as what the bureaucracy means and the cold-heartedness of it. And a lot of games have really touched on this. The guy who did Papers, Please went on to do Obra Dinn, and Obra Dinn, the guys who I know Cardi's big fan, Porky's big fan. We've got a heap of people who love that game. Death and Taxes is the other one. There's a few big titles that do it, and there's a lot of other titles that do it. Like, it seems to be the two main genres at the moment, if you don't count Battle Royale, tactical RPGs and bureaucracy simulators, simulators. So they're the two main.
Just get on JobSeeker.
Yeah, well, everyone's got time to experience it at the moment. Thanks, Joshy. Yeah, so it's a good chance to really investigate these games and see what this, and I've enjoyed my time. Like I've played a fair few hours of it and things like that, but. I don't know. These games exist as a political message. I think it's one. People talk about, I don't want politics in my games. Well, this is definitely not the game for you. And I would argue that games have been political for a very long time. You're just catching up. Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard to straight out say that you should definitely play it. But at the same time, like I've enjoyed enough of my time with it that I think it's an interesting, quirky idea. I got it cheap. I got it for like $4, I think. And yeah, so it was worth my $4. Would I have paid 20 for it? It's still worth it, but I mean, we live in a world of these great indie/B titles anyway now. So $20, throwing $20 on a game is far less of a gamble than it used to be.
I mean, you were saying the concern around no politics in my game, thank you. No shit posting on my timeline. Oops. If you are one for the politics, the bureaucracy, the intrigue, the drama and conflama of these things. Does it really, like, if you are into that kind of stuff, is it a lot easier to try and recommend it to that crowd? I think crowd, because a lot of us are political as well.
Yeah, you are like this is the thing. You kind of preaching the choir with it. That's kind of its strength and its failing. Luckily enough, it's funny. There's interactions where the actual the speech and the written word is funny enough. Some of the interactions with the guests are funny. Some of the similar to what was his name? Old mate in Papers, Please. He'd show up with fake ID. He'd drawn it himself. Yeah, and so it was like, it has those elements of humor to kind of keep you going. Otherwise, it'd just be a dreary slog, and you couldn't do it. But I think the message that it's selling is not. I mean, I don't find it a particularly controversial message. It makes perfect sense if you think about it. But like, I think once you hit kind of 5-6 hours, and you've got like 4 or 5 gigs on the go, and trying to balance all that, and trying to figure out what the best way to pay for everything is. So you've got the kind of in some cases it reminds me a little bit of XCOM. As much as you've got the game in front of you doing X, I have to bounce this pub, I have to kick the right people, you got the meta game of, well, I need to earn enough money to do this, but I want to help this person for story's sake, but I want to make sure that I don't fail this. So you've got that kind of the two layers to it. So there is some complexity to it, but the actual core message and all that is just a pretty straightforward moral play on what would happen to what was once an Englishman and is now a foreigner.
Cool. So, Not Tonight is out now on. You've been playing it. What console have you been playing it on?
I play on Switch, but it's on Steam as well.
Cool. So just those two. No PS4 or Xbox.
I don't believe it's on the consoles. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm nearly certain it's not on there.
Interesting. At least PC and Switch.
Yes.
Go and check it out if you want a little bit more existential dread in your life and all the politics in my games, please. Yeah, you're right. Just switching Windows. Party. Cool. That pretty much wraps up the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us at home. If you want more New Game Plus, check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/New Game Plus TV. Jamie put up a new recommend.
3,000 subscriber the other day, so go pump our numbers. Literally one of the comments I moderated while we were talking was, oh my God, I can't believe you guys have so few subscribers. Again, for the joke at home, our comments range from, I can't believe you have so few subscribers to, this isn't a New Game Plus mode. You're fucked in the head. Like, yeah.
New Game Plus TV on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitch.tv/New Game Plus TV, 8 p.m.-ish on Thursday nights. We record the show live, and you can also check out our Twitch streams that we do pretty much every day of the week. Maybe not weekends, but pretty much every day of the week. I think that's pretty much everything. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.